Hi everyone, it's John from What Up. Welcome back to another video. This is part 2 of my interview with Lauren from Unraveling the Pattern. Now we are still talking about VFX and special effects in this video, although now we are mostly centric upon how we think the one power is going to be handled as well as a few other little tidbits. Now, I warned you the videos would be long. The first one was exceptionally long, longer than I liked, but a lot of really good information in there, and this one is slightly shorter. I say slightly, but not really. So, we also have a community section in this video. At the end of the video, I go through the Wheel Takes. It's another Wheel of Time podcast. They are fantastic. Please check them out. So if you've already watched the video or you're watching it in shifts and you're up to the community section, the link to the community section is down below in the description box. You can click that to go right to my little blurb on the Wheel Takes. Now, if you haven't already done so, I've also left a link to Lauren's YouTube channel in the description box. Please click that. Go check out his videos. They're fantastic. Please support him by subscribing and leave a comment or two on his channel to let him know that you come from here. All right, before we get started, spoiler warning, in this video we're going to be talking about visual and special effects that we think are happening for Season 1. Now, this may entail any and all scenes from the first season, so if you haven't already read the book series, be forewarned that we're going to spoil some things, at least some specific scenes in the books. So if you haven't read New Spring, The Eye of the World, or The Great Hunt, we may reference things from all three of those books, in addition to scenes all the way up to and including A Memory of Light. So this one is a pretty heavy spoiler warning. We're going to talk about pretty much anything and everything. So if you haven't read the book series, be forewarned. We may spoil some things for you. All right, let's get on to the video. Hi everyone, it's John from What Up. Welcome back to another video. This is part 2 of talking with Lauren from Unraveling the Pattern. I warned you it'd be a long one. We're going to get into, in this video, we'll talk a little bit about Mordeath and Mashadar, then we'll segue into the World of Dreams and the One Power and how we think all that's going to happen. First thing we'll talk about, I guess, is Mordeath and Mashadar.
Yeah, and thanks again for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this stuff. My favorite thing in the world is to nerd out about the Wheel of Time and this stuff, so I talk a lot. So thank you so much for
absolutely. I'm the same way. I'm word heavy.
Yeah, it's the way it should be, right? This is people. Great minds think alike. We like talking about this stuff. That's why these channels exist. Okay, so we skipped over this in our previous discussion, but to me, Shadar Logoth needs to be a special kind of visual, right? It needs to visually somehow stand out from the Dark One's evil while still feeling dark and terrifying. I love some of the artwork that I've seen of this dilapidated city falling apart, feeling almost like it's been choked by this evil, and then feeling like there are empty windows everywhere, but there's something there. I don't know how they're going to portray this. We talk about, wouldn't it be cool if this, that, or the other? And a lot of these things, I'm just hoping that Rafe and his team of experts have had those conversations and have figured out, because I don't know how to do it.
I'm sure they've sat down, and I think Sarah's gone on record a number of times. She doesn't talk to them unless someone specifically asks her a question or she has a fact. She gives no opinions, so the opinions are them. Rafe has his opinion people, but she's the fact person. So I think he probably has a whole room of people going, what if we do this?
Right. But it's amazing. It's the restraint that Sarah must show. That's incredible to me, and maybe it's because I'm a creative guy who wants to come up with the visual ideas. I would have a hard time not wanting to pitch in,
Yeah. And
I respect that a lot.
You shouldn't, which I would do all the time. I have a big mouth, so.
Yeah.
But back to the idea where you said that Shadar Logoth should be different evil. I think so too. Like, I think the Dark One's evil is more of a, and I can't describe it any other way than saying it's a hard evil. It's pure evil. And Shadar Logoth and Mashadar and Mordeath is a soft evil. It's more of a sad, empty, terrible form of evil. Like you go from nothingness to maybe chaos. You know what I mean? Different.
And one of the things that when you were saying that, like, the Dark One is portrayed as the shadow. It is literally the darkness. That is not how Shadar Logoth is portrayed. It's a scary city, and at night it feels very dark and scary. But in reality, Mordeath has no shadow. No. Right? That's one of the things that's fascinating about Mordeath is he figured out a way to counter the shadow, and he did it in these other evil ways that aren't related to the Dark One. But he was doing it, at least at the start, for the light. Right, that was his point. Was to be he had good intentions, and so I love that idea of Mordeath not casting a shadow.
Yeah,
But how do you
what? I
portray
never
that?
thought of that till just now when you said it. So
Isn't that an interesting idea,
fantastic.
though? So I wonder if, and another thing, when I think of the evil of Shadar Logoth, maybe it's because I'm just rereading The Eye of the World right now, so it's on my mind. But when I think of the evil of Shadar Logoth, I equate it more closely to the White Cloaks. And
Yes,
they're sort of like overzealous
the victory of the light
religious
is
fanaticism.
all. Yeah,
This whole idea that they're like, they speak for the light and they decide who is a dark friend, that sounds like Mordeath to me, right?
yeah.
And it makes sense that later on, Pattern Fane / Mordeath
Kind of
teams up
aligns
with the White
himself with the White
Cloaks
Cloaks.
because they're already kind of that type of evil that he's
Yeah.
looking for. And so, anyway, that being said, I don't know how you portray Shadar Logoth because you don't want it to be bright and beautiful. You still want it to be scary and dark. But anyway, that's just something that came to mind. Keep it separate somehow from the dark one.
I think
And
more run down,
yeah,
slummy and run down.
And maybe maybe it's a sound design thing. Maybe it's a feeling of emptiness or a feeling of fog or wind around you. As far as when they meet Mordeath, I can't wait to see how that all goes down. I love that idea when he has no shadow, but he's standing in the shadows because the light also affects him and he can't stand out in the light either. He's like this weird evil that sits between dark and light, which is really cool about his character. But then they follow him down, 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 down. Eventually they see that treasure room. I can't help but think of Aladdin when I think of the treasure room.
Yeah, just like that, like the Cave of Wonders with all of the treasure everywhere.
Right, just heaps of gold and jewels and weapons and all this stuff. That's what I think of, although in a much darker sort of cavernous room. And what's the name of the dragon in The Hobbit? Smog's sort of thing as well, but maybe not as large or open.
Mm-hmm. Now
that's how I envision that.
I'm worried about a number of things when it comes to CGI and visual effects and special effects and stuff. But Mordeath in Shadar Logoth, in that scene where he's trying to give them the treasure and trying to get them to take it outside the walls, and they kind of you have no shadow, and he figures it out, and he wails and he swells up really big, and then he gets really small and he goes through the crack in the wall. It reads really well. I can't see it being portrayed on the screen without being cheesy at all. Like I don't know how they would do that.
I think one of the things, and I can't remember if this happens, but I think there are torches lighting the room, and then as he swells and freaks out, the torches go out. Is that correct? Does that happen?
I think some of them go out. I can't. It's been. I don't know. I can't recall exactly.
I can't either, but that's how I envision it. I envision it almost like you don't straight up see the dude swelling like a blueberry in Willy Wonka, right?
Yeah.
You see it, although that might be fun in a alternate take or something. But I like the idea of it almost being the lights go out, they can barely see, they're straining to see, and they see this sort of shadowy thing growing around them.
Oh, that's a good way of doing it. Yes.
It's not so literal that it's just obvious what goes on. It just freaks them out. I also think you mentioned, as far as the VFX go, that scene has to be carried by acting. Like, Mordeath has to be. There's got to be something off about the guy,
Yeah, and we don't know who plays him yet. Like, we have no idea. So,
I really hope they don't cut Mordeath. That would be a real shame. But anyway, so and then of course there's Mashadar. I've never been totally clear. Is Mordeath Mashadar? He isn't. Right?
It's an extension of his form, I believe.
But didn't he find Mashadar and then use it, and that was one of his attempts to defeat the Dark One, was sort of like taking on Mashadar's power. Like, it already existed and he sort of like harnessed it or something. I can't remember exactly where I read that.
It was, I think it was on the Theoryland posts. There were some posts about that. I can't remember off the top of my head, no. I do know that by, spoiler warning, I guess we haven't done this yet, guys. Spoiler warning for this video. We're going to be talking about things up to and including the end of the Eye of the World, and I'm going to mention something here shortly that happens in A Memory of Light. So if you're already this deep into the video, things have already been spoiled for you, and I'm sorry about that. But by the end of A Memory of Light, he learns to control it and use it as an extension of his body, and that happens literally throughout the books, little by little. When we do see him, he's not a main character. He's not fleshed out as I'd like him to be as a character. But that early in the novels, I don't think he controls it yet.
Right.
He hasn't really. Now, later on, it's Fane and Mordeath who are the same person. that make sense?
Right.
Early on, it's just Mordeath, so maybe he can control it. I don't know. I was never very clear on all of that. Is kind of left to speculation and stuff, I guess.
Right. I do think it's very clear in the Eye of the World that the sort of foggy tendrils of Mashadar don't have a mind of their own.
No, they just kind of
reach. They just kind of like swirl around.
Yeah.
I think there is a moment when they sense something and latch onto it.
Yes.
Like a Trolloc. Yeah. But I don't think that they're out like searching for something to eat. No. You know, they're just kind of swirling around mindlessly. So, but I absolutely agree. Later, clearly, as is it Shaisam? Is that what he's called? As he evolves, he gains some sort of sentience or control over that fog, and that's really fascinating. As far as how they portray that, I think they can do an interesting job with just having some swirly bits of fog sort of moving around, almost like they're alive but not, just kind of swirling around and being scary.
Have you seen The Mist, the Stephen King miniseries?
I haven't.
They do the fog. If there's creatures in the fog and stuff in that show, but the fog itself almost seems to move and be alive and grab people at certain points. And I think something like that would be great for Mashadar. Like they did a really good job. I don't know how they did it, but they did a really good job of that. It didn't seem cheesy. It didn't seem overwrought. It was just really well done. And that's a limited series TV show, so. It's
not it's funny.
Budget.
I played the old Wheel of Time video game that came out like in '98.
Yes, yeah, I remember that.
And I loved that game. I played it over and over, and I figured out cheats for it, and I played it in like God mode where I could fly around the levels. But the Shadar Logoth levels, that is still how I envision Shadar Logoth, because it made such an impression to me. However, Mashadar is so corny in that game.
It's pretty
literally bad. These like, it's like if you've seen The Abyss.
Yeah.
That like moving sort of like snake of water.
Yes.
That's sort of how the tendrils of fog are in that video game. I like to think of them as more of like wispy, almost like dust devils or whatever you might call them, where they're sort of swirling around vertically as opposed to like horizontal lines that come and snake around. It could be all of the above. You know, have you heard of the term red shirts?
Yes. Yeah.
In TV shows?
Yeah.
So for those who may not know, a red shirt is usually some sort of actor that is included with the group that isn't really an important character that they can use as a disposable character to kill off. And it comes from Star Trek. Back, you know, the red shirts were the ones who always died when the ship got attacked, right?
They go on a away mission, and you knew the guy in the red shirt, he was not coming back.
Right. And it's a famous thing that's used in a lot of TV shows, where if you have your main set of cast members and a random guy joins them, you're like, that guy's going to die by the next scene, right? That's like a common thing. So in Shadar Logoth, it would be beneficial to have red shirts. I don't think other people should join the group, but my point is it would help to be a little more scary. And maybe this could be the Trollocs. As the Trollocs start to appear, because we do see some of them get grabbed by Mashadar. Maybe that's the kind of thing that it's when you realize Mashadar is scary. It snatches the Trollocs and eats them up like they're nothing.
Yeah. And maybe have them run in fear from it, and the Fade's trying to drive them. They don't care. That would work really well.
Yeah, exactly. You need to show the effects of it, and the sooner the better, because then it could be something as simple as they're walking through the city or something. Now, well, I guess that happens during the day. My point is you could have like a deer run in or something.
And it just like an animal or something, yeah.
So anyway, oops, bumped my microphone there. That's the kind of thing that I think can help create the fear. Visually speaking, I trust the team to figure that out.
Yeah.
It needs to be tendrils of fog in some way, though. It can't be just smoke machines in the background or something.
Yeah, you know? Smoke machines and fans. That's all they're going to do.
Yeah.
They're going to waste the budget on channeling and not on Mashadar.
Yeah.
So speaking of channeling, that's the big bones of all of this, the meat. How are they going to do that? Like, channeling is something that could be really well done or really badly done. And I don't think there's much of a middle ground. It's either going to be fantastic or terrible. I don't think we're going to see, it's okay. I don't think we'll see that.
Well, you know, I'm a firm believer that just like the books, at first the channeling should be something we see the effects of only. We don't see weaves. And I think most people agree with that. I think this is absolutely the thing they have to get right. Right. And I'm a little scared about it because I want it to be amazing. And I've seen a lot of bad magic and a lot of bad media. So, you know, how do they go about this? So first of all, there's this term show, don't tell, right? When it comes to things as complicated as the magic system that Robert Jordan has created, you have to do both. At some point, you have to show weaves.
Yeah.
and someone has to tell you how weaves work. But when it comes to VFX, you can have someone like Moraine raise her staff in the air and it's on fire and she swings it around and a fireball shoots out of it without knowing how she did that. I think that's perfectly acceptable. Mm-hmm. And I do think we'll see things like that at first. I think maybe the first time we see an inkling of weaves, I don't even think it'll be this early, but maybe it's when Moraine is teaching Egwene for the first time.
Yes,
as Rand
I think that's probably the
listens
best
on.
spot.
At least there we can talk a little bit about, because that's the first time in the books when you find out really that Saidin is tainted. I mean, I think you learn about it in the prologue, but it's not clear.
They talk about it a bit there, but that's this the segue where they talk about, or whatever it's called, when they squaff and they talk just about the one power, because you don't know much about it at all. You know she has magic, but you don't know what the magic is.
Exactly. To us, she's just sort of like a witch or something. Yeah. Who knows what she does? I have a great quote here from Robert Jordan, if you don't mind me reading it. So someone asked him, when a person channels, where do the flows appear? Where do they originate from? Do they extrude themselves somehow from the person's body, or do they seem to appear out of thin air in the channeler's general vicinity? What do the flows look like to a person who can channel? Are they colored, clear, indeterminate, smooth or rough, wispy or solid? So this is Robert Jordan's answer to this. Yeah. So he talks a little bit about how the flows appear to a channeler, and then he talks about how the flows look. To the channeler, the flows seem to originate in his or her very immediate vicinity, not to emanate from themselves, although to another channeler, those flows do seem to be emanating from the channeler. The latter is the actual case, as the one power is passing through the channeler, one of the reasons for individual limits on how much of the power a particular person can handle. Then he says, a channeler sees the flows as colored very faintly, according to each of the 5 powers.
Okay.
So he says red, fire, blue, water, green, earth, yellow, air, white, spirit. Although the, quote, feel of the flows are also different to a channeler, so that a channeler can tell one from another without actually seeing them. And then he goes on a little bit more. Tinged with color, he says. Transparent, smooth, and tinged with color. The reason why this stands out to me, is the video I'm currently working on my channel is all about the one power. And I'm trying to create my own visuals of what I think that should look like.
Okay.
Now, I have the benefit in my channel of going over the top with my look, right? My channel is kind of over the top and colorful, and I do fun things with the Wheel of Time floating in space and all this. You can't get away with that in a serious TV show, right?
No, you couldn't have somebody standing in a building doing the same thing, and it wouldn't feel right.
Exactly. So I'll tell anyone who's going to see my next video, just be aware that I'm going to take very many creative liberties with how I envision the one power for the purposes of my channel. But for the TV show, I think what comes to mind, and you've mentioned this, and Rafe Judkins mentioned this on Twitter as well, Doctor Strange is a great, the Marvel's Doctor Strange movie. They show them weaving these sort of designs of magical color in front of them, and then those form into what they call spells. Mm-hmm. But we could call them weaves or flows of the one power. I see that working really well. This sort of design look of weaves that happens in front of them. I think that'd be a really cool way to portray it. What are your thoughts?
It would work well too, because most Aes Sedai in the books, and I'm saying most, learn a weave with hand movements. It's not necessary. They don't need to do it. But because they learn it that way, they have to continue doing it that way or it doesn't work. So maybe don't explain that until later on in the books when they actually meet the Aiel and see the Wise Ones, because they don't use the hand movements. But they could, like Doctor Strange, weave the things together with their hands, because that's how they're taught. And then later on, as things progress and you see other channels that don't do that, you still see the weaves, like the Doctor Strange stuff, but they're just not moving their hands. They're just standing there, which would be kind of neat, because at that point you already realize and know how things work and how things are weaved together, which would be good. And I think where you said where you show don't tell for the first little bit, I think that's 100% acceptable, probably for most of the first season, except for when they're in the tower learning. And when they get to the tower and they're starting to learn, and when you see it from, I think when you see it from a certain channeler's perspective, so Egwene or Elaine or Nynaeve or any of them, Moraine, if that scene is from their perspective, I think you should see the weaves being actually woven together and used, or if 2 channelers are fighting each other. But if you're seeing it from a third-party perspective, say Rand or Matt, or someone else like Perrin who couldn't channel, you're not going to see anything. You're just going to see the after effects. I think that
Absolutely.
we'll see different ways of them doing it.
I completely agree. And I actually think, even what you mentioned, I think showing the weave should only be there when it serves the story. For example, as you mentioned, when Egwene is being taught a weave, you need to see that weave happen. You need to see the flows, however they do it, whether they intermix like this or whether they quilt some sort of blanket, or however they do that weave of flows, that needs to be visualized. But if Egwene is being taught, for example, by the wise ones, how to create a gateway for the first time, which is what happens. Of course, the gateway is a little different, but she is taught, and again, spoilers, but she is taught how to create a gateway into the world of dreams, physically to go in, right? They show her that. It would be cool to see that weave happen and then snap into place and show that gateway open. But the next time she opens a gateway, we don't need to see the weave, in my opinion. You could just see a flash of light or a flow that happens quickly and it opens. I don't think we need to focus on the weave every time. When Nynaeve is prodding or sort of searching for a way to heal, we need to see some sort of flows happening. Yes. And it would be even cool if that was happening in anatomy in some way.
That would be super neat.
In the brain or something, like going into them.
But again,
that's important.
You're saying if we've seen it already once, especially when you have dozens of channelers on screen, which happens a number of times in the series when they're fighting each other, seeing all of those weaves together would be convoluted and complicated. Seeing the end result of them fighting would probably be more aesthetically pleasing, I think.
Right. And to your point, we don't need to see them weave lightning every time. We can just see the lightning. But it doesn't hurt to have, and again, I know that it depends, like women channelers glow to other women channelers, whereas men don't see that glow.
They feel
but for our purpose, it's helpful to see someone with a light or a ball of fire coming out of their hand or some indicator that they are the ones that made that lightning happen. You know, it doesn't need to be a flow necessarily, but it needs to be something emanating from them that then creates the effect, right? Just so we're clear who's doing what. And that could be done in a glow. That could be done in a variety of ways. One thing that Rafe Judkins mentioned, he said, this is director dependent. But I think it'll be great. And then there's another quote in his recent AMA where he says the VFX are amazing, like just effing awesome, right? That's what he says. So I think, again, we got to trust them, but it's not necessarily completely up to Rafe. It sounds like he's letting the directors kind of do this in a way that they want. And so we may see all kinds of interpretations of how weaves in the One Power
different ways things are done, different battles, different everything. Because I mean, when you look at the directors that are directing the first season, they've all done different sorts of shows, and they all have they're all very experienced, and they have a lot of a lot of experience directing, but they've all done different types of shows. I mean, you have one director who's done, I believe Wayne Yip's done Preacher. And then you have other directors that are more drama heavy, or you have other directors that are more action heavy. And so I think you might see, I think the way they chose the directors for the first season was very specific. And for whatever we're going to see in those episodes, like Yip's episodes will probably be very battle centric, because I think that he's very good at that. Whereas some of the other directors, maybe their strengths rely more drama or romantic scenes, and we'll see some of that in theirs. So I think that's where a lot of Rafe is giving them freedom, is saying, you do what you want, you do what you do, because you take a creative person who's very good at their job and you give them something to work with and you let them go. It can either be really, really good or really, really bad, but it doesn't cost them a whole lot to let them try at least first anyway, without any heavy instruction. Like micromanaging is not a great thing in any sense of the word for any profession. And I imagine it would be pretty bad for film and television as well.
Yeah, and we talked about this off camera as well, but when you're directing a movie, the director has a lot more direct input into just about everything. That's not to say that TV show directors don't have input. Of course they do. And at the end of the day, the episode they direct is their episode, and they absolutely are making creative decisions all the time, and they are the ones to listen to. But when you're dealing with a TV show, you also have what's called a showrunner, and that's what Rafe Judkins is. And Rafe and his team of writers and people like Sarah Nakamura who are helping get these things right, hopefully, right? And we have faith in them that they are doing that. A lot of times what will happen in a TV show is you'll have what they call a style guide, right? I think that's what they call it. It may be different. I'm thinking more in design terms, a style guide or a brand guide. But I've seen some really cool. One of my favorite cartoons growing up was Batman the Animated Series. I loved that TV show when I was younger, and I've seen some really cool images where they have essentially what is a do's and don'ts Bible that they give to the animators
Yep.
that say Batman should never be positioned like this. His cape should act like this. His cowl should look like this. They have very specific rules that a creative director has gone in and determined these are the rules for this animation. I imagine that they'll have something similar, maybe not quite that detailed, but something similar for things like channeling. They'll say, this is the general idea. These are the do's and don'ts, but you're the director. Work within these parameters, but do your own thing. And I think that's the way a show has to work. I could be wrong. I've never run a show, but I would imagine when it comes to things like magic and how that should look, they have like a production designer or some sort of creative designer.
Somebody who's in charge of just that this is how it should look, but do what you want with it as long as it's similar or close and follows these rules. Yeah.
And so I think there are going to be some things that maybe don't sit well. I've always wondered about, for example, how is Moraine going to step over the wall?
Yeah, that should be like, will it translate really well for her to make herself grow like that and step over the wall?
I think that's going to look super hokey. I think she should just sort of be on one side and then the other side. Like, I don't know how they'll do that, but
I don't know.
Those are the kinds of things where we'll see. We'll see how they do it. I mean, remember when Gandalf grows very slightly in the Hobbit hole?
When he gets menacing and big, and it's just a camera trick down here, something like that.
Yeah, it's a camera trick. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like, is he growing or is the camera moving? What's happening? And they have this sound of like the wood in the Hobbit hole creaking, like he's growing, but he's not exactly. Like that's the kind of thing you could pull off with Moraine. It's more of like a camera trick than a
than a big
growing
giant 50-foot Moraine walking over a wall.
Yeah, I just can't see Rosamund Pike doing that, but maybe they'll make it work, So anyway, but the point is, this is up to the director, at least to some degree. And I love that Rafe says this in this tweet. He says this is director dependent, but he does give a nod to the look of Doctor Strange. He says, I do like how that looks, and that's a good sign to me.
And I like Doctor Strange how it looks too. I don't know how difficult that is to do or how much money that would cost, but visually it worked really, really well. Like I was worried. I'm a big Marvel Comics fan. I read all of them, including Doctor Strange when I was young, and I liked them, but I was horrified of how they would do it and how they would show it on the screen. But they did a really good job with what they did for the first movie. I really liked it. So if they do something similar, I'd be happy with that.
And another example is even with Doctor Strange, they don't always show him quote unquote weaving.
No, he'll just do this sometimes, and things will happen.
Yeah, sometimes there's just those like vines that fly out of him and grab Thanos. Mm-hmm. Like how did he do that? Well, I don't know. It's magic. Yeah, like you don't have to see how he wove that spell. You just know that he's smart enough to do it. And so I think there are definitely things we can get away with. We'll see. This is the biggest challenge. Game of Thrones had a mass appeal, but if you take the fantasy, especially like magic elements, especially in the first season or two, they're like tiny.
Yeah, there was not a whole lot.
Right. It's plot and drama and learning about characters and character development and obviously some very controversial things like incest and other things. There were things that made that show very intriguing, but the magic was so minimal, right? And that's
even in the later seasons, the magic was still pretty minimal when you think of a fantasy show, right, or a fantasy series.
And there are some people who argue that's why it became so popular, so mainstream, is because that stuff was sort of toned down, and people who don't like that stuff got into the characters, and then they were like accepting that, okay, this world has dragons in it or whatever, and I think with the Wheel of Time you can't do that. There's magic right at the front. Moraine is throwing fireballs from her hands. Like you have to see that stuff.
Yeah, she's fighting in Winter Night, which is arguably like it's going to be in the first episode. You're going to see magic right away.
I sure hope so.
Yeah,
and so this is challenging. One thing I was going to say, another movie that I find very inspiring, and I believe some people have done some internet sleuthing, and I believe the VFX team who's been involved with some of the Harry Potter movies is also involved with the Wheel of Time show.
Oh,
don't quote me on that. I'll have to do some research to be sure, but I believe that's something we figured out on Discord.
And they did a really good job with magic in those movies as well. Like it was more of a just happens. They do the thing and it happens.
Right, and I have to say some Harry Potter movies are better than others, but there's a scene, and this is spoilers for Harry Potter. Hopefully this isn't a big deal for anyone here, but there's this scene at the end of the Order of the Phoenix, and this is the moment before Harry loses his godfather, right, Sirius Black. and what are they called? Death Eaters? I think
Yeah, the
that's
Death
what
Eaters, yeah.
the Death Eaters are fighting some of the people from the Ministry of Magic. And the Death Eaters have this sort of like dark magic that's flying out of their wands, and it's got this sort of like smoky black look to it. And then they like when they teleport, they even are like they turn into wisps of black smoke and appear and disappear. And then the good guys have this like very white, sort of bright magic that's coming from their wands. And that may not fit within the books. But I thought those visuals did an exceptional job of showing us the good guys and the bad guys fighting with magic in what was, to me, an intense and very satisfying way. And when Sirius Black does get hit and then falls through that doorway and dies, that was a really emotionally impactful moment. And I thought they did an exceptional job. And all it was a bunch of bright stuff
lights
and dark stuff flying around, and it worked for me.
It worked well. Yeah. So if they do something like that for a lot of big battle scenes, that could work too. And again, like you said, director wise, like the director could say, "This is what I would like to do for this because I think it fits well."
Right,
which would be good.
And I don't think they necessarily have to be like, this is that very specific weave that Robert Jordan called, I can't think of all his weave names at the moment, but there's like certain very specific fire weaves. The Death Gates, I do want to see the Death Gates.
Yeah, I want to see them exactly as is. They were pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely envision gateways to be a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it as a very quick flash of light that kind of goes and opens up like this.
Yeah, and it's just
like a vertical, that's how I envision it. I don't know if that's how they'll do it, but making that look cool, I thought they did well with that in Doctor Strange as well, where they have like the portals that they enter.
With the slip ring, yeah. No, that was super neat, yeah. So if they do something
adding that sort of like ash or sparks around it, that worked, So.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think we'll end it there. I hope all of you enjoyed the video. If you do have any comments about anything we've talked about today at all, please leave them in the comment section down below. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what your thoughts are on Mashadar and how the One Power will be portrayed, and if it'll be like Doctor Strange or the Harry Potter movies or any number of other things. Also, don't forget to check out Lauren's YouTube channel. There is a link down below in the description box. He has some amazing videos. Go there, spoiler-free and spoiler videos, both. So if you haven't read the book series yet, which if you haven't, you're probably not this far in the video anyway. But go check his channel out and leave him a comment as well. If you haven't subbed to him, please do so. I want to thank you, Lauren, for showing up today and discussing all this stuff with me and lending your expertise, because I literally knew nothing about any of this stuff until we talked. So that's great.
Thank you so much. I had a great time, and we should do this more often. This is a lot of fun. And I promise my next video is coming. It may be a while, but it is on its way.
Thank you all very much, and here's to many more. Welcome to the community section of my video. Now, in today's community section, I have a podcast, The Wheel Takes. Now, they give me a little bit of a blurb here to read, so I'm going to read that now, because I have a terrible memory and I can't remember anything. So Wheel Takes is a podcast that's half reread and half new read. It's hosted by Gus and Allie, an engaged couple. Gus has read the whole series and is approaching the podcast from the perspective of a reread. Allie has not and is on her first read. They usually discuss 1 or 2 chapters per episode, whatever fits into a 60 or 90 minute window, and Gus quizzing and walking Allie through the chapter, and Allie offering her completely unfiltered takes on what's going on and making both completely inaccurate and sometimes pinpoint correct guesses about what's coming next. They're very irreverent and intended for a mature audience due to language and off-color humor. Wheel Takes contains no spoilers past whatever chapter they're discussing. Right now, they're about halfway through The Great Hunt, and all their episodes have spoiler content clearly marked in the title and description. Normally, they release 1 episode per week, but because of the quarantine, they're doing episodes 5 days per week, every other week, so people have a surplus of content. They dropped over 12 hours of podcasts in the last 3 weeks, and they're all on the standard podcast platforms. I can't speak. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and so on, as well as all social media. They've only been around for a couple of months, but they're overjoyed by the warm welcome we received from the online Wheel of Time community. So there you go. They are a fantastic podcast. I've listened to a few of them, and if you are a new reader or just starting to read, I would definitely take a look at them because they are going chapter by chapter, and it's pretty good. So I've left a link to all of their social media and how to contact them, and as well as their podcast down below in the description box. So please, please, please go check them out and support them. They are fantastic. Now, I do want to thank you all very much for sticking with me through to the end of this video. It was another really long one with Lauren. However, a lot of good information, and I really had a good time doing it. I want to thank you all very much, and here's to many more.